Good morning, Guten Erev Shabbos. Welcome. I'm going to wait for Facebook to load up here. It's loaded. Today we'll do a summary of the Mamar, which had 4 parts to it, of what we called Why Daven Every Day. It really talks about the effects of davening and what davening accomplishes, but more than information, it's how it's done. How do you technically daven? What do we have to do on our part? What are we trying to achieve when we daven? And of course, its connection to the parsha. I should mention that davening is called avodah shebelev. It's the service of the heart, and as the Zohar says, it's war, it's battle. It's a very difficult thing to do. It's not automatic. You don't just show up and you're davened. There's a level of davening. Ask Hashem what you want, but for it to really affect us the way davening is designed to affect, that requires a lot of work, and it's a constant, daily struggle. Reb Mendel Futterfass once said that if all the Balei Taiva are people who, they're just into enjoyment, even in a kosher way, they're into their food, they're into their experiences, they spend a lot of time and focus on the pleasurable things of life, which unfortunately could lead to lack of sensitivity for some spiritual things. However, he said if all these Balei Taiva would try davening, they do it all day. It's so geschmack, he said. If once you get into it and you do it, you'll love this thing. So if you're into enjoyment, try the davening correctly, because you could go there for hours.
The ring is it free?
That's second best. No.
Second best? It's a reward.
So the Mamar began with the pasuk from our parsha, Kiseitze la melchama alei vecha, that when you go to war over your enemies, and Hashem will put them in your hand, and you're going to capture captives. Basically, you're going to come back with prisoners of war. So we open the Mamar telling us that the time of davening is a time of battle from the Zohar, and he brought proof of how you have that, various different psukim. You see from Yaakov Avinu that when he talks about Shechem, and he says, I captured Shechem with my bow and my arrow, with my sword and my bow, it gets translated in the Targum with my requests, which means with my davening. So we have to understand what's davening all about. Davening was originally established to correspond to the lack of sacrifices, which as a result of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, we no longer have the opportunity to bring a carbon. What's the point of a carbon? So to understand the carbon, we have to understand where our neshama comes from. We have a godly soul and an animal soul. Our animal soul has a very lofty and intensely spiritual source of energy. Everything that exists has to have a godly energy. The godly energy of the animal soul is from the chayis, or the behemoths of the Merkava. Now in the Merkava, in this prophetic vision of spiritual revelation, there are various different faces, and the faces of animals represent a spiritual, we'll call it heavenly animal. Okay, it's not God in any way, can't underscore that enough. That energy goes down a chain. There's angels that are fueled by that energy, created by that energy. It keeps going down, and there's some bumps along the way. It gets fragmented, it gets layered, cased. By the time it comes down here, it has all the strength and potency of this godly energy, but I don't want to say it's corrupted, but it ends up in the wrong places. So the other side, which is impurity, has access to this. So now you have this animal soul, which is divinely created, of course, and it's spiritual, but it has desire for animalistic things, but not the heavenly animal, the earthly animal. The earthly animal means what it wants is self and survival. Part of it is extremely important, and it's very good. You can't live without survival instinct, and it's a gift from Hashem. And by animals you see it very strongly. But at the same time, it also has this thing that it's all about me, and it's selfish. And what do I get from it? And I want pleasure, I want enjoyment, I want fun. The problem with all those 3 things is that sometimes either it's not allowed because Torah doesn't allow it, but if I'm selfish, I say I don't care about Torah, or I don't care what Hashem said, I want to do it. Or people have an issue with it, and then it would also be against Torah. People have an issue with it. For example, you need money in order to buy this and this thing which you really, really want. And you don't have it, so you steal it. So I don't care. I don't think twice about it because it's all about me. That's the animal drive. Now, it's not just who cares. So, what is it? It has a lot of power to it. It has a lot of drive. It has a lot of energy because it comes from an extremely high place. So, the process of a carbon was meant to help eliminate or elevate, bring back that animal energy, animal of the Merkava, the heavenly animal energy, in a right way, in the proper place, so that it won't have these bad tendencies. Now, the way that you do that is, in the practical sense of a sacrifice, they came to the Beis Hamikdash, and they brought sacrifices for many different possible reasons. A person could make a promise to Hashem, that if they win the war, which we always avoid promises, but if they win the war, then they're going to bring an offering. Or they want to thank Hashem for something. They didn't promise to, but they're so grateful, something amazing happened in their life, and they bring an offering. Or they did a sin, whether it was on purpose or inadvertently. There's various different ways, but then you have this daily offering in the morning and late afternoon. And these timidin, which were constant, daily, this was on behalf of all the Jewish people, and you put the animal on the Mizbeach, and the mitzvah is that the hedyot, meaning the individual, the small person, the human, has to light a fire. This is not a godly fire, this is a human fire. We do our part, we put the fire on the Mizbeach. And then, poof, from heaven came a heavenly fire in the shape of a lion, which descended and consumed it. So now what's playing out is animal fire, or human fire, my effort, which represents sometimes the animal soul and all that negativity which it leads to, selfishness. And then there's a heavenly fire, and the heavenly fire comes and consumes the animal fire. So the person that was dealing with animalistic desires and temptations, etc., all of a sudden that energy is channeled to something higher. And that happens every single day, in the morning and before night, which was very, very helpful in our service to Hashem, because I could change my drive of being so selfish to a higher purpose. At least I have the help, the inspiration, something which is going to help me do it. Because again, it's a very good thing. We're not destroying it. We want to transform it and change it. Then the Beis Hamikdash gets destroyed, unfortunately, and we don't have this experience anymore. So what's the typical person supposed to do? Where's his inspiration from? Where does he take his animal soul and elevate it daily? What are you like? How's this going to happen? Have this fire which is interested in selfish pursuits? It's wrong, but it's very, very intense. So for that we have davening. So Anshe Knesset Agdola, the men of the Great Assembly, they said, you know what, let's daven. And they set up davening daily, and this process of davening does the same thing. It takes our animal soul with all of its intensities, intense drives, and it connects it to the heavenly fire of where it comes from. We discussed in other Mamarim that when you tell your animal soul that where you come from is the same place where angels come from, meaning you're not bad, you have this ability, you just have to harness it for something good. You talk to it that language, it works. You realize that in general, instead of telling someone, whether it's a child or a student or in any situation, that they're bad, if you tell them that they're good, you have much better results. Plus, they're not bad. But we tell our animal soul that you're not a negative thing, you're just corrupted. Ended up in the wrong place. Bad friends, bad influences. It's not who you are. Bubala. Okay. So then we have davening. Now, what happens by davening is we want to remind the neshama of where it comes from, that it's a very, very high place, and the opportunities that it has to connect to Hashem. Okay. What is this Hashem? So we can't understand it, but we could meditate and reflect on the greatness of Hashem. And the more we realize how great He is, that develops a love towards it. In general, if you contemplate about someone or something, how amazing it is, you develop feelings towards it. The thing about Hashem is that we never saw Him and didn't hear His voice that currently, and it's hard to just have a feeling for something which you can't see and you don't really grasp. So it takes a lot of meditation. The person has to reflect, think about the greatness of Hashem, and that's what davening is designed to do. The first part of davening is that Psuke de Zimra from Haidu, and we get it and we're discussing and thinking and taking, a lot of it is taken from Tehillim, from David HaMelech, but about the greatness of Hashem. and the person is reflecting on that and thinking about it. And Hashem is so great. There's the greatness of Hashem in the world, and there's the greatness of Hashem in my own life, right? But there's this feeling of Hashem is great, and He created a great, vast world with a lot of details and intricacies, which the more you realize the amazingness of it, the more you feel, I want this. I want to connect with Him. Okay. Now, what we want to do is transform the drive of the animal soul from having a passion for negativity and animal and worldly things to still do the worldly things, but with less of a passion. You don't have to think the entire day about your meal, but you have to eat, and you have to eat well, and you have to eat every single day. But it doesn't have to, what's for lunch doesn't have to be in your mind every waking minute.
Barbecue chicken.
Today?
Yeah.
Very good. You don't invite any of us?
Yes, of course, right. All that.
So the idea is that I want to have a certain lack of passion for those things, which I'm not going to eliminate because I need them, and Torah wants me to have them, and Hashem says I should do them, but it doesn't have to be the same passion. Okay. Now, back to that fire that we want to get from above. You can't get that fire automatically. In Kedusha, in general, in holiness, things don't happen automatically. If you want something, you have to work for it, you have to earn it, you have to deserve it. This is the general way of Kedusha. Regarding Klippa, impurity, regarding Mitzrayim, we say it was free bread, which means shameful bread. When you get something that you didn't earn, it's a handout, it's an embarrassment. And in general, Kedusha as a whole requires effort. So you don't just say, Hashem, I want a fire. You have to do something for that fire. What do you have to do? You need to put in your fire, your effort. You got to do something on your part. When you put a foot forward, then you evoke a reciprocity from Hashem, which that really helps you. What is this first step forward? It's hisbainus. A person has to take the time and reflect, try to think about it. That is something that we could do on our own. We could think about the greatness of Hashem, and it'll affect us. He actually uses a term, umemele, automatically, they'll shine the light of Abba, which means through your efforts, the next step, you'll have a Abba. What are you thinking about? So this hisbainus is, where does my animal soul come from? It comes from Hashem Himself. It's chiseled out from, doesn't use the term Hashem Himself, but it's chiseled out from a very high place in heaven, like the Merkava level. And it's very, very spiritual.
But it's negative.
Yeah, down here it's very negative. It's not that it's negative. It's the drive is going towards negative things. An animal is not a bad thing, but all it cares about is self. And it doesn't have to be bad. It just ends up being bad because...
Even though it comes from a very high place?
Yeah. The unfortunate reality is that on the way down, it ends up with a lot of different influences that take you to the wrong place. Look at it this way. Godly energy is extremely, extremely powerful. And if it's in the wrong places, it'll still be powerful, but in the wrong way. That's why you have balance in the world. It's not just, it's impossible to do that, it's possible. If you try to go do something wrong, you're not going to get a flat tire on the way to rob the bank. Try it now. Okay. Okay, so the question is, where does it come from? Where does it really come from? It comes from the Chayesh of Merkava, which these are the animals which are in the chariot, and these this source is so holy and so powerful that if I could harness it correctly, I'm going to transform this drive for positive things to the extent that my animal soul, my physical body, is going to run towards mitzvahs. But that would be a tremendous transformation. That I'm not forcing myself and in a fight with myself. Like the Mendel said, he's running to daven. He wants to. He enjoys it. Okay. From there, we move on to the next level, and that is his bainus about malachim, sraf and chayes hakaydish. What we do during davening, Birchas Krishma, is a yid is discussing some of those things that we don't understand what's going on over there. We're talking about malachim and their excitement in various different spiritual levels of malachim, their excitement and ecstasy in the greatness of Hashem. They're shouting, Kaddish, Kaddish. What do they want? They want to be consumed in Hashem to the level that they don't exist anymore. We even mentioned that there's certain cases where malachim are recreated because they're so they expire by the many thousands and hundreds of thousands, and they have to be brought back, right? You recognize that. You realize that. 1 second, even the spiritual beings that are so intense, talking about Srafim, Chayes HaKodesh, Ifanim, all these levels, what are they looking for? They appreciate godliness and they want more of it. And they want to be so bottled to it that they're going to cease to exist, like a flame going to a fire. Maya Nefesh Abahamis comes from there. Same place that they come from. It's just a bunch of levels lower. I need to transform that. When you realize it's like walking into a palace. He said, you come in and you see the awesomeness of everyone around the king, right? It affects you. You see people bowing down to a king, it does something to you. You don't just shrug it off. Obviously, this is a powerful person. Obviously, these people are in awe of him. It affects you also. So when we daven after Pesukei de Zimra, thinking about the greatness of Hashem, we come to Birchas Krishma about Malachim. That affects us also. To the level of Yira that we have this awe for Hashem, and we're telling our animal soul, you have access to this. You have this. Now, we recognize that everything we have in this world and the spiritual energy that we're connected with is from the level of Malchus, meaning there's so many levels of godliness, and the 10th one, which is considered to be concealed, and it's only a display, if you will, like it's a Malchus, like a king. It's not your essence. You're expressing kingship. Huh?
Can I ask you point to where you're looking at the Mamar, so we could read the puzzle maybe that you're going off with?
So the dot is the line starts with mehem. It's second column, 2/3 down the thing. Kihine.
Yep.
We can even do it inside a little bit. It says your malchus is the royalty of all the worlds. That all of the chayis, which comes from the light of Hashem, and its function is to sustain the worlds. Where does it come from? It's not from His essence. It's from a level of malchus of Hashem. But Hashem is unfazed by any of it. So you're realizing two things: that everything that I'm excited by in this world is just from the malchus of Hashem. It's not even His essence, and He's not changed at all by this whole creation thing, or by these angels bowing down to Him and screaming in ecstasy. It's none of this stuff phases Him. Why? Because Hashem is essence, and essence doesn't change. And this is what we say that that the fact that they are praising Hashem's name is only the name that they're having access to, which means it's not His essence. We have access to essence, right? We have Torah mitzvahs. We have the ability to connect to Hashem on the deepest of levels and so on. So you're excited about something, but it's not the essence itself, and you have the way to get to that essence. Okay. We then get to an interesting concept called Ratzoi V'Shuv. A person has to have, and angels have this, running, I'm on to the next paragraph, running and returning. Running and returning means, on the one hand, there's this intense desire to go towards Hashem, and this interest or strong love causes a person to want to, the neshama to want to expire from the body completely. Now, to expire from the body would means that he can't exist anymore. It's like these angels. If they go too far, they have to be brought back. What's the point? You have to have this duality the whole time. On the one hand, you have to have this ratzoi, where Yid is running, he wants to connect to Hashem, and at the same time, he has to return and settle and say, no, can't go too far. What does that mean? That means that I want Hashem, but the way that I manifest it is through a physical, practical mitzvah. This mitzvah has a time, a place, instructions. It's not just, we're going to sing Kumbaya and everything is great. There's some very practical things of how this is done. So you have the Ratzoi and the Shuv. That takes us to the difference between Torah and mitzvahs. Torah is the greatness of Hashem, and in a sense it could be a Ratzoi that you want more of this, and we should have more of it. But then there's also the Shuv, which is the mitzvahs where we say, settle, do this specific thing. Now, Ratzoi is Ava, and Shuv is the Yira. Okay, Ratzoi says, I want Hashem, that's all I want, that's all I care about. And Shuv says, okay, 1 second, follow the rules. Just because you want the king, you still have to respect, you still have to know how it's done and so on. And in davening, we have a combination of these psukim. On the one hand, we have psukim we talk about Avas Hashem, and we also have psukim we talk about Yiras Hashem, V'chal Hashem Agdula Ve'agvura. And other examples that he brought, you find in davening where you're developing those emotions, Ava for Hashem, which is the Ratzoi, and a Yira for Hashem, which is the Shuv. The Yira would say, I know you want to, but you can't. Or you still have to stay in this world. Right? We actually know the tune. They tell a story about a Bacher in Lubavitch who was tremendously spiritual and davening very, very long, like many of the Bachrim did, and correctly so. There was a certain tune that he would use for davening. It wasn't a song, it's a it's called a tnua. It's like and he was davening one day with that, and his soul left the body. It didn't come back. I'm not talking about him, but in general, that's not the goal, right? The goal is that a person should have the tremendous desire and not have klei nefesh. No, again, I'm not judging him in any way. The point is that there has to be the Ratzoi and the Shuv. The Ratzoi is the Ava, and the Yira says, do that, do this and this and this. The mitzvah. So in davening you have Ava and Yira. Now you also have a third expression, and that is the expression of Rachamim. And these are the three Avos who establish the three Tefillahs, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Chesed, Gevura, and Tiferes. Now, it's not that one is better than the other, it's a progression. So you have the Ava, you have the Yira, and then you have the compassion, or the mercy, which brings both of them together. A big drive in our service of Hashem, or working with our Nefesh HaBahamis, and really is the compassion that we have for our godly soul. Because we recognize that we had this in last Mamar, that it's in captivity. We remind ourselves that the Neshama was very spiritual, doing positive things, and now here it's struggling with craziness of the world. Give it the access. Let it daven, let it learn, let it do mitzvahs. Compassion is also a drive for ourselves, for the Neshama that's in ourselves that really wants it. We mentioned that when a person wants to eat and he feels hungry, Baal Shem Tov says it's your neshama calling. It wants the spiritual spark that's in there. It wants the bracha. It wants the kosher food. It's something spiritual that says, hey, let's eat. That's why you feel hungry. I guess it's one of the reasons why I feel hungry, because you want it. Then we discussed machshava and dibur. Okay, so the world was created with 10 utterances. Really, could have been with one, and there is one main utterance, but even that one, it doesn't have to be called dibur, speech. It could really be called machshava, because in machshava there is dibur of machshava. You have thought, you have the speech of thought. You didn't actually verbalize it, express it outside, but in your mind it's words, and it's from that we have this this descent and desire to connect. Let's do the bottom of the third column inside.
Starting with
Achine, there's a period there. Achine machshava shehu moker v'sheresh l'amad izgalya. Machshava, which is the source and the root of the revealed world, it's called dibur, gilui and revelation, and that is the big daled of echad. So Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad basically says like this: Havaya, which is the higher level of godliness, Yud Kei Vav Kei, or a higher level, comes down into the world by way or manifestation of Elokeinu, which Elokim is the level of godliness which is much more, we're going to call it filtered down, but God forbid it's not changed, it's just playing out here in creation, and it's the same level of godliness. There is nothing else. He doesn't change. It's just, from our perspective, it's giving us the opportunity to have creation, to have the function of godliness in this physical world without it busting. and it goes through the 10 Mamares, and therefore it's called one machshava. Now, when a person realizes that, that's when he gets to Avas Hashem. Because he realizes that it all comes from the same thing. You see, when you look in the world and you say, there's Hashem, but I also love barbecue chicken,
English muffins.
English muffins. You gotta up the,
Flavor a little bit.
it's fine. Teach their own.
Cinnamon English muffin.
Okay, all right, they get a little better. But in any case, so there's godliness, but there's also some other stuff. But when you realize that it's all one and the same, everything comes from Hashem, and the more you realize that it's only what He wants is what matters, and there aren't two tracks, that's how a person has that true desire and recognition for what's right. Okay, so there's two ways to deal with struggle. You could say there's two sides, they both have power, and I gotta do the right thing even though I don't want to, and maybe even beneficial to do the wrong thing, etc. Or you say, no, it's all Hashem. It's not even a contradiction, I just have to reveal how it's not a contradiction. In other words, those other options in life are not what Hashem wants. Hashem is there. He created that I should not do it. And I got to harness my animal soul, which seems to have these drives. I could just switch it off. Easier said than done. I switch it off to positive drives, using the same passions and emotions. Okay, but in the process, I have to have the duality of ratzoi and shuv, because this is beinunus. It's not enough just to feel. It's not. It's like almost like not a big deal. You can feel excited about godliness, as long as I don't have to do anything. Right? But once you say, okay, bring it down, I'll get back into practical life in the world and keep that desire, that ava, that's where it's a big deal. And you have to have the ratzei and the shuv. Now, this is what it says, that you're going to war over your enemies because that's the enemy. It's the animal soul that we're trying to transform, or another way to say this is you're trying to take it into captivity. I want to catch this and bring it in. And Hashem tells us you're going to be al eivecha. You're going to have the ability to be above it. You're going to take it over. Okay. The Mamar went on to the next ice about that if Hashem wouldn't help us, as a Mamar Chazal, a person would never be able to overcome the Yetzer Hara. It's not a small challenge. It's a real thing, and it has real intensity. And if not for Hashem, if Hashem doesn't help him, he would not be able to overcome it. This is al eivecha, that Hashem is giving you the strength to do it. And there's two parts. Number one, that it's very strong and you can't do it without Hashem. But number two, you should remember that Hashem is helping you overcome it. Hashem doesn't give a person a challenge or a temptation that's bigger than themselves. Or he does, but they're able to help. Hashem helps him that he could overcome it. He has what it takes to say no to drugs. That's still a thing?
And stay in school.
And stay in school.
Stay in school or go to homeschool. I mean, that's better. Get into homeschool.
Okay.
Stay in private school.
Stay in private school. Yes,
Private Jewish school.
Okay, let's do the last few minutes inside. Knowledge. A person cannot transform the natural state of his midas to change it completely, unless he has a help, assistance from Hashem. Can't do it. If Hashem would not help this person, you can't transform it. It's not going to happen. The person does not have koyach in his soul alone to go up and be included in his shadish. You can't just, I want to go back to my source. You can't do it. The only way to get there is after Hashem will shine a light onto your soul. Now we already said the way to get that to happen is you have to evoke that. Through davening, through esbeinos, through trying. It doesn't just happen. But if it doesn't happen, it's very, very hard to accomplish this. You get that through the shine which comes through Torah and mitzvahs. Just like we said, our animal soul comes from the chayes sha'ala kisei, which are on the chariot on the chair of the Merkava. There's also the face of man. The face of man is representative of Torah and mitzvahs, because Torah and mitzvahs are 613. A person is comprised of 248 and 365, sinews, limbs, etc. These are conduits for the blood to transfer between the parts of the body. Torah mitzvahs brings forth the light, shine of Hashem, into the person. And that's that shine that's helping us overcome the drives of the Nefesh HaBahamis, and not just overcome it, but transform it, which is our goal. Which they are the transferer to the blood, which is the soul. Now, how does this happen? How does this energy go to all the limbs? How does the light of Hashem go into our lives?
Neurotransmitters.
Yes. Through fulfilling and keeping two negative mitzvahs, meaning refraining from them. When a person controls himself and doesn't do what Hashem said not to do, he gives a certain energy, strength into the fire above, which is in the level of the kisei of the Merkava that's shared. You're basically giving it fuel that fire should be able to come down and to be included